Good afternoon, everybody. It is Thursday, March 25th, 2021. Welcome to our third edition of our virtual planter clinic at Kibble Equipment. My name is Chris Horeb, and joining me, I have Margot.
Hi. Hi, good afternoon. Margot Chic.
I'm just going to do a quick overview of what we're going to cover here today. This is being streamed live on Facebook, so you can ask questions and comments in the live chat, and we'll try to address those. This will be available later on Facebook as well as on YouTube. In the last few weeks, we've done two other different sessions. We call them Part 1 and Part 1.5. They were more around what you need to do when you initially hook up the planter in the yard and get that initial hydraulic hookups, what to look for in the monitor to make sure everything's getting set up. A few weeks ago, we did one on the Generation 4 monitor and SeedStar 4, and then just yesterday, we did a version of that with 2630 displays and SeedStar 2 XP. So today, we are going to focus on what do you do when you get to the field for the first time, and we're going to focus mainly around SeedStar 4, but this will apply to a lot of other planters as well. So again, my name is Chris Horb. I'm broadcasting live from the Owatonna location. I've been with Kibble Equipment for about 2 years and work mainly in the technology support group. And I've been with John Deere in general for about 20 years.
And my name is Margot, and I have been with Kibble Equipment 7 years, and I've been in the John Deere world for about 20 years as well. And I am in Tyler, Minnesota today, our location there, and I spend most of my time traveling amongst the Kibble locations, focusing on the technology side of things over in the western locations in South Dakota. So,
Perfect. Okay, so to tee us up, we're going to start with a few different slides to cover some things to look at, and then Margot is going to shift over to our simulator and actually simulate what it looks like when you're planting with the monitor. So yeah, why don't we get started?
absolutely. Okay, so to tee this virtual clinic off, we like to talk a little bit about what our goals are and when it comes to planting our crop, corn and soybeans. So, Chris, do you want to talk a little bit about what we're looking at here, and we'll have a little discussion around that?
Yeah, I mean the whole idea that we have with planter clinics forever is to try to get things ready to go so that when you go to the field, you get it done right the first time. If you look at this slide, this is some third-party results from some universities that talk about the impact to yield when you don't have the right population, when you don't have even emergence, when you don't have uniform spacing, and when you don't hit that planting window. And so getting ready to go is all going to impact everything here. So if you look at the yield impact range on the bottom, uniform emergence is huge, making sure that you have consistent depth so that all the plants come out of the ground at the same time. But doing all this prep work is really focusing on that planting window. I've seen a lot of other independent studies around the hours that you spend in hitting that early planting window, especially in our neck of the woods in the northern Corn Belt. That early planting window, 9 times out of 10, is your highest yielding planting window. So every hour you spend now while it's wet out getting things ready is an hour less that you're getting things set up when you could be planting in that ideal window.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, these are all the jobs that a planter has to do for us, and there's different parts of the planter that are responsible for the population, emergence, spacing, and then we make decisions on the farm on how we configure things to, get the best out of our planting window, and just readiness in general gets us there. So we're going to dive in a little bit here and talk a little bit more about specifically emergence and the things that affect emergence. And it's some things that we can do at the planter, but it really is your whole operation, your whole cropping cycle when it comes to how we handle residue management. That's something that starts behind the combine, and it probably ends with the planter, right? And then also at the planter and planting time, we're going to be in charge of making sure we're at the proper depth to get that seed into moisture. And then, of course, applying the right amount of downforce, and that's to be consistent in that depth and to be consistent with how the meter's performing, and placing that seed into the seed trench. And then lastly, closing wheel downforce, which is, that seed to soil contact, that critical seed to soil contact to give that seed the best start it can. So we have all these little seeds emerging as plants, all within the same, essentially 12 to, I think, 48 hours is the cutoff.
Mm-hmm.
They all have to be coming up within that window in order to be equal and not competing against one another.
Yeah, and Margot, we've been doing a lot of performance upgrade kits for planters. We're putting new technology on older planters, and one of the most popular ones, besides ExactEmerge, which is that even spacing and speed, has been the individual row downforce, and it goes back to that previous slide where you see that big impact of even emergence. And I guess my advice has been, if you're just going to do one thing, I think individual row downforce is highest on my priority list. But when you're doing all these other upgrades, it's kind of like when you're remodeling a kitchen, right? You don't just do one thing, and that's when we do a lot of other things at the same time.
So we're going to talk about these options today and these settings, what we can do in the field to adjust for the best possible outcome. And, you may or may not have all the options that we go through today, but there's something on your planner that does affect it, right? So with that, we're going to get started. Before I move to the simulator, I just wanted to take a quick review of downforce. And because every year we get lots of phone calls and questions on downforce. How much do I use? How do I adjust it? And of course, we're looking at some options here on the screen that are, late model equipment, some of the things that we have. And what we're calling out here is if you've got features like row cleaners, closing wheels, that are, and whether they're the easy adjust row cleaner or a screw adjust, manual adjust row cleaner or a manual adjust closing wheel, to get get your depth determined and those set up before we start dialing in a bunch of downforce adjustments, because one will affect the other. And this is just a sequence of how we want to make sure things are set up. So if you do have the frame weight distribution feature, get that dialed into where we want to start with that. Get your row cleaner set where you think it's going to need to be, your closing wheel set where where you're going to think you're going to need to go. And then we always start with a little bit of downforce in the system, and then we adjust from that when we go to the field. So with that, when we go to the field and we talk about downforce, just want to, we've talked about why it matters. We're talking about making sure we have a defined trench, a seed trench that allows us to drop that seed straight to the bottom, so there is no inconsistencies with depth, right? Something that's too loose could cause issues with placement and depth, and that would look, so this is a good seed trench example. The closing wheels are obviously tied up in this picture, and that spacing, you can visualize your spacing when you're doing a field check, of course, and then it is at the bottom of every seed trench. The seed is, or at the each seed is at the bottom of the trench. That's what I'm trying to say. And, of course, if we don't have enough downforce and that is not set appropriate, we get caving of sidewalls, and you can get this situation here where we have seeds that are not going to emerge at the same time. And of course, the opposite would be too much downforce. So this is, the other way around, when we start putting too much down and we start having compaction of those sidewalls, we're going to have poor plant health, poor root formation in those early stages, which may affect it later on as well. So just wanted to kind of get ourselves dialed in on what too much looks like or too little looks like. So when we're watching our monitor and making adjustments in the cab, we're moving things the right direction. So adjustments in the cab. And we discussed downforce, and we have sensors on our row units When you move into a IRHD, individual row hydraulic downforce system, there is actually a downforce sensor on every row, on every gauge wheel stop. If you're using active pneumatic, so you're using the airbags that are adjusting, you have maybe 5 sensors across your machine, and it's looking at those and it's making adjustments on the go for downforce for the whole planter frame. But the rules are all kind of the same. That sensor is actually measuring what we call margin. Okay, and we get a lot of questions. Well, what does this number need to be, and what does it really mean? So when you think of downforce, that's the pressure that we're putting on with either the hydraulic downforce system or the airbag system, or um, heavy duty springs do the same thing. They apply downforce. Okay, of course you have the weight of the row unit. So together, those may be applying 300 pounds of force. Okay. Now there's force being pushed, as you lay a row unit down on the ground and you pull it through the field, there's resistance from the ground and the soil, right? So that resistance, basically the difference in that resistance from the ground versus the force we're applying, that's the margin. That's the load that we're carrying. So in this example, 300 pounds of force pushing down, 150 pounds of the force from the ground coming back at it. The margin, 300 minus 150, 150 pounds of margin. Okay, that's what your sensor is reading in the field for us. So, and there's 2 modes, whether you're using individual row hydraulic downforce or active pneumatic. There's a set point mode and an active mode. And it's very important to know when you're in which one. And we'll talk about that when we get to the simulator. But in set point mode, you are not active. You are not moving on the go. It is, you've told the system, I just need 200 pounds of downforce. I know that gets the job done and I just want to keep it there. It's not reacting to field conditions. In active mode, it should be taking that margin reading and actively changing the pounds of force needed to maintain that margin when we're operating in the field. So just wanted to get through these slides and kind of review that before I jumped over to the simulator. So with that, I am going to, pretty sure, oh, I lied. I have one thing I can't show you in the simulator. So we're going to talk a little bit about unfolding planters. If you've got a newer SeedStar 4 planter, something that you've had delivered on the farm in the last probably 3 to 4 years, we no longer ship these planters with a frame control box. They are all controlled for fold and unfold through the monitor. There's an app inside the monitor, inside the SeedStar app, that allows for frame control. So you either can be in transport mode, just like you had the switch on your frame control box. You're either in transport mode for folding and unfolding, or you are going to be in plant mode when you want to raise, lower, and plant and activate your markers. So that's what we're looking at here, the toggle between transport and planting mode. And then, of course, if you have this feature, we have something called Easy Fold. So you can toggle to transport mode and either unfold your planter manually. So this basically becomes your switch box on the screen. You press what you want to do first. I want to maybe if you're folding, you might want to raise up your hitch for your folding height, and then bring your wings in, those sort of things. Or Easy Fold, it pretty much automates the whole process with one SCV press. So to set that up, you have to go inside these Easy Fold settings and first calibrate your hitch position for a 1775 planter. And that's basically where it's going to be for all the way up for transport, where you want to have the hitch position for planting. And then usually for folding, we put it somewhere in the middle where you know that the latches on the wings will clear the hitch. And then we also need to go inside the SCV settings on this screen and automate it, toggle the automated option there, and then tell the tractor how the machine is plumbed for your frame and your markers, as well as the vacuums. So these SCV assignments also will affect a feature called vacuum automation for us. And we'll talk about that here in a couple more slides. So anyway, now that we got it all set up, which our shops will be setting this up before they deliver them to you, but wanted to review that just in case you needed to, you got a different tractor and needed to set that up. But once we are ready to unfold, in the easy fold option here, if everything is enabled, okay, we should be able to hit enable easy fold. So it gives you even a checklist of what you have to do to fold or unfold. We also note that to enable the whole system, kind of like with AutoTrack, you have to hit your resume switch for your AutoTrack to enable the whole process. So once that is enabled, we should be green, good to go, and hit this enable easy fold option and then activate your SCV. SCV1 is your automatic SCV in this example, and you just hold that until it folds or unfolds, and it will do all the things it needs to do, whether it's raise, lower wing wheel, bring in wings, or lower a hitch down. It'll do it in the right sequence and order of things. As it's folding or unfolding, you'll get the little spinning circle, and when it's done, it'll show you that it's complete. So really has automated that and made it nice and simple and easy for us.
Yeah, but do not go to detent, right?
Yeah, so that leads me to my next slide. If you click it into detent, this message over here says it's paused. So when we're operating easy fold in this auto mode, you just hold either the extend or the retract, whichever way you're going, in that position to activate the easy fold, for lack of better words. And then if you let go, it'll pause. If you push it into detent, it will pause, and you'll have to bring it back to neutral and then reactivate it. Talked about vacuum automation briefly. So this is a SeedStar 3 screen, but the concept is the same. So when you're assigning the SCVs, we also assigned what SCVs were plumbed to the vacuum. And during that process, essentially, instead of worrying about how much flow do I need to put on each of my hydraulic valves to take care of each of these hydraulic vacuum motors on the fans, I can just say, hey, I know for my seed size today that I need to have a target. In this example, we have a target of 11 inches of water for vacuum. Then it will essentially determine how much flow it needs to do that. So if it's a little bit more in the morning because it's cold and the oil's a little colder, or if it's a little warmer in the afternoon, it will adjust accordingly and just maintain that target vacuum pressure that we're after. So really nice feature of moving into an electric drive planner with that vacuum automation. That's something available on both 5Es and ExactEmerges. So that leads me to setup. I've got a little checklist here. I kind of robbed it or stole it from our Equipment Plus app. The same checklist is in there. We'll talk about the app at the end of our session today. But in order to when you get yourself to the field and, okay, what's the order of things to make this thing happen, right? So if you'll transport to fold and unfold, right? And then you'll have to switch to plant mode so you can then operate raise, lower, and operate your markers. And then with electric planters, we have to engage our PTO power generation by turning on the PTO. And then there'll be a button on our screen to turn on the EPG. That's our electric power generation, actually on the planter side of things. So that engages everything from a power perspective. Then we'll move to making sure our hydraulics are enabled and turned on to continuous detent for all of our vacuum fans. And then we'll lower our planter, because when we lower our planter, of course, we have that on detent, continuous flow on the lower side to operate our CCS fan. So we've filled up our CCS tanks with seed. We're ready to go. We incorporated our talc while we were filling. Now we're ready to prime the mini hoppers down on the row unit. So lowering that planter will pressurize that tank, push that seed down to those mini hoppers, get those full. Now that they're full, I'm going to ask you then to raise the planter back up. And then inside our monitor, we have the opportunity to basically prime our meters and our seed delivery brush belts. So it's called a so there's a fill button that you'll press, and that will rotate both. It'll energize the drives to rotate the meter and the belt. You'll press that a couple times until you see seed dropping out. And then now you've got your planter primed. And now that the meters are full too, that in a traditional planter, you'd have to adjust your vacuum. Now that the seed discs are primed, or with vacuum automation, it should just automatically adjust it, maintain that target, or go to that target. So once we get through all of that, we're ready to lower our planter and go plant. So not much to remember there, but like I said, the app is very good at drawing this out to you. And of course, by day number 2, it's like second nature. Okay, so with that, I am going to go ahead and move to my other screen and go to our simulator.
But I like the checklist, Margot. It's like you're a airline pilot and you're trying to make sure that you don't forget a step and kill everybody on the plane, you know.
Oh, shoot. I may have lost a connection over here. Oh, nope, I did not. Here we go. Perfect. Okay, so now I've jumped over to my screen with our simulator on it, and now we're looking at a SeedStar 4 monitor and a command arm for a tractor, and we're going to basically walk through that checklist now on the monitor, like we're in the cab getting ready to plant, because I want to make this planter plant so we can look at this monitor work and we can walk through everything we can do from the cab when it comes to monitoring our planting operation. All right, so with that being said, I'm going to navigate to the planter overview screen, and I've unfolded the planter. I actually have my hydraulics engaged for my vacuum motors here. I am going to turn on my PTO, then turn on my EPG, and I've got my planter currently in the raise position. And if I hit that SeedStar hotkey on my shortcut bar, this is where I find that meter brush fill button. So I can hit this fill button and that will rotate the meters while the planter is raised until I press that a couple times until you see the system is all primed up. But now I'm going to go ahead and lower the planter down to planting position. And I have vacuum pressure here, you see. And then I'm going to ask my tractor to drive forward. My planter has been sitting for a few minutes here, so we'll get her going. So now I'm planting, indicated by the coverage map here. And of course, I'm getting some monitors down below on this overview screen. Any monitor that's in the green, that usually means it's doing, it's really close to target. Or any monitor that's highlighted in orange would be a little away from that target. And then if it's red, it needs attention, right? We need to make an adjustment, take a look at something. So this is the overview screen. This is a nice page to look at, kind of just driving through the field, because you do get that coverage map, and you got, the basics of the planter down below. But if you really want to drive into the details, I'm going to page over to my planter details screen, and this gives me more of a full picture of the planter. And of course, I got my layout laid out over here, so I can still see my coverage map and upcoming boundaries or flags, those sort of things in the field. We have several monitors inside one, right? We've got population, singulation, spacing, we have downforce monitoring. And then of course, if you take the option on your planter for the row cleaners with the easy adjust row cleaners or the pneumatic closing wheels, you'll have those controls up here too. So no matter what we press up here on the top, you're always going to have your population monitor at the bottom. Okay. Nothing's changed here. Your center line is designated as your target. Bars above, below the line. You're either seating slightly higher or slightly lower than target. If I want to change my population, I can hit the population tab, And then this will get me to my pre-assigned rates if I want to change my rate. So now I just switched to 33,000 seeds. My target is at the top of the tab. My actual population is at the bottom of that tab. Okay. If you need to go in and change your rates, you sure can do that from here. We got a little link to get there as well. I can always go back to my tile view and come back into my gauge wheels, or I could have just tabbed over and looked at my gauge wheel monitor. So this one's titled gauge wheels, but this is our downforce system, our downforce monitor. So it's kind of split into two views here. On the top view is our downforce margin. So how is the planter performing? You know, based on the target margin that we have in the system, how is that planter performing at keeping it close to that target margin? So once again, a center line for slightly high, slightly lower than that target. You'll get bars above, below. On the bottom side of the screen, we're currently looking at ground contact. Well, you want ground contact to be high, nothing lower than 97%. So we want a full bar down here. So these two kind of go hand in hand, especially if you're going to run an exact emerge planner and explore those faster speeds and explore that productivity that you get with that planner. We want to keep an eye on that ground contact, make sure we're using more downforce with that planner than maybe you did with a traditional planner. In general, Deere says a default target margin on an exact emerge is 100 pounds of margin. It used to be that 75 to 85 range. In general, whatever you were using before, about 30% higher if you're going to use to maintain that ground contact at those higher speeds is what they've been recommending. So with that being said, this button down here, we're looking at ground contact, but if you're curious, because remember, we're talking about margin. So this is the load on the row unit we were talking about that we need to do a good job. If you're kind of curious how many pounds of actual downforce is in that system, you can toggle this button over here, and now we're looking at pounds of downforce on the bottom monitor here. If you want to make a change, so maybe you stopped. So we started with that 100 pounds of margin as the default. We're going to get out and do a field check. Remember those slides we were looking at before? If we get out and we decide that, oh, this is not enough, I do not have seed in the bottom of my trench, it's crumbly, I need a little bit more downforce, it's as simple as touching this button here. And we are in active mode. So we talked about set pointer active, that's on. And then just give it a little bit more margin. We think we need more. So it might make this change in 20-pound increments is the default here. So increase that margin, go ahead and plant another little ways and give the system time to react and do another field check. So in general, if your seed trench is loose and not adequate, use a little bit more margin until you get there. If you have way too much, we use a little bit less. And of course, as you see here, I made a little bit of a change. So it's using more downforce now, right, to achieve that margin, which makes sense. What we're looking at up here, target, actual margin, and then what rows high, what rows low. And of course, because it's individual row downforce, these guys are all kind of interacting independently. You could also, if you wanted to watch a specific row inside any of these monitors, you can zoom into the details. And if I just want to watch these 4 rows a little bit closer, maybe you want to watch the ones that are in the center of the planter, or closer to wheel tracks, whatever it may be. Or if you want to dial into a specific row, you can click on just row 6 and see what's happening with all aspects of row 6, population, spacing, singulation, all of the above downforce. Anytime you dive all the way down into an individual row, you can get back to the overview by hitting the tab at the top, and that brings you back to the overview, the planter at a glance screen, that we would call that. So that is kind of the ins of and the outs of the downforce. You can also, if you don't want to come in here to adjust margin, we can do it over here. That's what this little hotkey is over here as well. There's also a pause option with our active downforce systems or individual row downforce systems. And maybe you're going through a portion of the field where you just don't want to read and adjust. and you just let it maintain where it's at. You can pause that and then restart it if you so desire. I think we'll move on now to the next monitoring tab here. And we'll look at singulation. So the singulation tab, much like population, shows us where we have skips, where we have doubles or multiples. So bars above would be a multiple, bars below would be a skip. Now, let's talk about troubleshooting and adjusting for population and singulation. So your meter is what's responsible for population in singulation. So if we're having a row that's very problematic or not dialing in from a population perspective, we definitely want to stop and take a look at that meter, maybe pop it apart, make sure the hub is tight and tensioned, make sure the seal was good on the cover. Sometimes we don't get them, latched in quite right. Make sure the meter is engaged into the drive on the row unit. Seals are tight. Maybe we didn't get a seed delivery hose or a vacuum hose reattached, something like that, if we had it apart for something else. It could also be somewhere in the brush belt too. I have to take a look at that brush belt cartridge, take a look at, make sure the seed sensor is hooked up, things like that. But when we have troubles in the field with singulation and population, we're really starting to kind of hone in and dive into that meter. Could be vacuum. It also could be as simple as a double eliminator adjustment. So we'll talk a little bit more about that when we get to the app later. The next monitor that we have available to us is spacing. So this is displayed as a coefficient of variation. So a little different on this one. Instead of having a center line and building bars below and above, we kind of start at the bottom with this graph. And we want short little bars here because the bigger the bar gets, the more deviation and spacing we have. So that says if it's supposed to be only, 5.8 inches apart for your population, how much, deviation from that, either tight or wide from that perfect spacing. So our electric drive planners, exacta merge planners, they are capable of, this is your average up here. This might be your high row up here. Your average is up here on the bar. So your average seed spacing right now is 0.15, very low. They say not until you get to about 0.3 coefficient variation will you see really any impact to yield because of poor spacing. And then your high row is indicated right here. The top of this graph is just 0.05 CV. The last place I'll go is to this tab over here. We have one more maybe monitor to check out. We already saw ride quality under the gauge wheels tab. We also are able to see RPM and torque readings here. If we have to troubleshoot the motors for some reason, you might come in here. And then lastly, curve compensation. Want to make sure it's toggled to on. And the simulator, unfortunately, I can't simulate turning around a I don't know if you're farming around a obstruction, rock pile, tile inlet. Because we are individually controlled and we have an electric motor driving every meter and driving every brush belt, right? And they're timed based on our target population and the speed we're going. We can individually control that. So traditionally with a hydraulic drive planner, when you would go around a intake, was for an example, that inside of that planner started traveling really, really slow. And the outside of that planner couldn't go fast enough. So you had plants on the outside of that turn too far apart and plants on the inside of that planner too close together. So I guess they're all traveling. It's traveling all at the same speed, but because of the swing, it's not right. So this basically ramps up the outside, gives it a little bit more speed to maintain that rate, and it ramps down the inside to maintain that rate. So curve compensation is another feature of why would I consider going to that electric drive planner. So we just want to make sure it's on, and this icon right here will change. It'll go to a blue status and it'll curve, and you'll be able to see these bars if we're turning to the left, these bars would go up maybe, and these would go down, ramp down. So that pretty much got us through all the types of monitoring, right? We got population, spacing, singulation, that downforce system. So we'll bring back to the main overview here and talk about those row cleaners and the closing wheel option. So instead of getting out of the cab now and getting our impact and our extension and coming in and adjusting those row cleaners, we can now do that from the cab. So we, and I would say, row cleaners, we get them pretty close and we leave them, right? We don't take that time sometimes to adjust them a little bit later for changing residue. And so now we're more able to do that. A lot of time savings and a productivity piece with these row cleaners.
Yeah, it's just like, sorry not to interrupt, but it's just like deck plates on a corn head. They've always been adjustable, but the first time you set them in the season, they stayed the same way.
That's right. That's right. When you make it easy from the cab, all of a sudden we tend to tune things more and we do a better job. So so there's 3 presets to your row cleaners, and they're indicated over here. And then we have an up and a down position. So when you're down, you're going to use these presets. Basically, you have pressure in the system, and when they're up, they're going to be locked all the way. You're running them up. So if for some reason you needed to pull them up, you could do that. You don't need them in this field. And then your down position. And then we have 3 presets. They start from the factory. Number 1 is considered like a light residue situation. So you notice my pressure is quite less here. I should also explain the columns. So they are grouped by the wings and then by the center frame. So because of the dynamics of the center of our planter where we carry our planter weight and tractor tracks and things like that, they do plumb these separate between the center frame and the wings. So if you do want to carry a little bit more, like I have here, a little bit more pressure or a little less in the middle and less or more on the wing, you sure can. And then so this is your target, this is your actual there on the bottom. Preset number 2 would be for like medium residue situations. So, and then you can, they have your factory presets, but you can come in here and tweak anything you desire from there. So if you need a little less for some reason in this medium setting, you can do that. And then 3, that's going to crank up the pressure here into the 50s, but that's for heavy residue. Maybe you're no-tilling in this situation and you need everything you can get, or just a more aggressive position out of your row cleaners. So I mean, you really have a lot of adjustability in here. You're got individual presses of adjustments of PSI there with these row cleaners. So,
but just a reminder that number 3 setting, row cleaners are not supposed to be a primary tillage tool, right, Margot?
That's right. So we could maybe we might want to talk about that, right? So when we field start you guys, when you buy a new planter or when you're out taking a look at it, row cleaners have an important responsibility, and it's the last chance for residue management. And row cleaners affect emergence by making sure we're residue free inside that seed trench, right? Where it's going to allow, you don't want that residue getting hung up in there, allowing a seed to potentially fall on it, trap it. You could, affect your depth, right? And its ability for seed to soil contact. So we want enough row cleaners to make sure we're getting that job done, but we do not need to be plowing in front of our True V opener, because that later on, we've seen that happen in conventional till type situations, and later on, you get a rain and a lot of dirt moves back over. I mean, what you thought planted at one depth might end up, reality might be different later. So, once again, great reason to have them adjustable from the cab. Okay, so with that, I'm going to leave them in the middle, and I am going to move back to my screen, my main screen here, and go into my closing wheels. So when we're adjusting closing wheels in the with our current system with the mechanical adjustments, those, if you remember what they look like, right? You have a little T handle that you're adjusting, and you got about 4 notches that you can put in there, and each one just gives you a little bit more pressure. So So you have 4 spots that you can put it on a mechanical closing wheel. This is up to 25 positions that you can put with a pneumatic or that you can adjust with on your pneumatic closing wheels. And if you click into here, your pneumatic closing wheels are once again grouped for the wings versus the center frame, if you so desire there. And they say that if you think back to that 4-position T-handle on your closing wheel frame, 0 is you got it off and no tension. Number 1 is that first notch. Number 2 is that second notch. 3 would be your equivalent to the third. 4 is the fourth. And then you just get a little bit more with the pneumatic closing wheels with the 5th notch here. So that's like an additional 75 pounds that you can't get out of the springs on a conventional closing wheel. So, there's some video out there I was watching from John Deere where they have a planter that they had pneumatic closing wheels on, and they put a couple of traditional ones back on to do some side-by-side comparisons, especially as you start driving those faster speeds. And they stay much more stable, in those situations versus the spring. So that's how those get adjusted. You just you can either slide it up with this, or we can just the plus it up and down. And I've got mine synced to just make the same adjustment across all my zones, right? Frame, center frame, or wings. You can uncheck that if you desire, if you want something independent. So those are our closing and wheel adjustments. And now we're back to just the overview on our home screen. So with that, I think we'll just I'm going to probably pause. Chris, is there any questions? I might move over now into my iPad to go over the Equipment Plus app and how we can use that in the field as a resource. Okay, this is iPad. You can also download this app on your iPhone. And I'm going to back up here and kind of show you how I got here. So this is called the Equipment Plus app. It looks like this button down here. You can go to the John Deere App Store or your App Center to download it. And I've configured planters, and I've configured the planters in here, and you can add as many as you want. Obviously, we have bunches in ours because we're supporting different configurations, but I'm going to dive into this configuration for the 1775, which I kind of configured as an electric drive planter with Exacta merge, and we're going to use this to get ready to go to the field. Okay, so it's kind of laid out with checklists here on the corner. So remember the startup checklist that I had on a slide? If we dial into this and hit the pre-plant checklist, this pretty much walks us through the things I was talking about, if your memory gets a little foggy like mine. So it'll talk about how you can use the resume switch to enable the easy fold, and how you can use that to unfold the planter, be in transport mode, unfold your planter with easy fold, switch it back from transport to plant. Okay, now that we're all unfolded and we're in plant mode, you can engage your PTO to get your power generator going, and then click on your EPG. This is page 1 of 2. I can swipe over, and then it talks about engaging my vac motors, my hydraulics for those, lowering the planter, waiting for the CCS tanks to prime and fill, raising back up the planter, and then going ahead and filling your meters and belts. Then basically lowering your planter back down, and you're ready to plant. So that's a nice tool. Sure does help when you got all kinds of things on your mind, and there's always one. I mean, inevitably there's a buzzer or a pop up that comes up, and we missed a step. So next inside this app, the SeedStar portion, it goes over a little bit of what we talked about in our presentation today. So nice little resource here as well. But where I want to dial into is the planter checklist here. So we referenced this a couple weeks ago from the setup side of things, but now I'm going to talk a little bit more about, going to the field. So we talked about how we set planting depth last week by, adjusting our T handle, but validating it. Whoops. We have to go plant, right? So lower the machine, get out there, plant, and then verify if it's, at the appropriate depth. Next, adjusting row cleaners. We just talked about that from the cab, but we got to do that field start to verify and make that adjustment. Closing wheel downforce, it kind of walks you through that as well.
Hey, Margot, we did get a question about closing wheel downforce.
Yeah.
So Andy asks, on a high-speed planter, do you need more closing wheel pressure? I'm running one rubber wheel and one spike tooth. So I'm assuming he's got one, every other.
Yeah, so I wouldn't say it's going to depend a little bit on your soil conditions, but maybe we'll throw this YouTube video up on our website or get a link to it from Deere. But in general, I would say to stabilize everything, if you start thinking about the impact of driving faster, right? It's not uncommon to need a little bit more closing, a little bit more downforce to stabilize the row unit, a little bit more downforce to maintain depth, and a little bit more closing wheel force to make sure you're getting that good to seed to soil contact. And of course, if you are, a couple tricks on tricks on closing wheels, right? You can stagger your closing wheels to help with residue and flowing residue and things through them, because if that happens, they'll push, right? And they'll push even worse if you're going faster. And then of course that spike tooth closing wheel option, that can, the reasonings behind going to that model as well. It's not necessarily a Deere option, but if you're overdoing, it's supposed to help improve that seed to soil contact as well. So
yeah, and one other comment on doing different closing wheels on either side of your closing unit. Ensure to have them every other. So have it, don't have the spike tooth all on the right side, because then that can instigate some planter draft. It acts like a rudder. So stagger them every other, flip them back and forth. I've run into a few of those issues in the past as well.
Well, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but it makes sense. It would draft a little bit differently potentially from tracking perspective. So yeah, so hopefully answered your question, Andy. I know I kind of dodged the bullet. Like everybody wants to know like exactly how much downforce do I need, but until I would say in general, a little bit more the faster we drive, right? In all aspects, we're finding that more and more. If you're really conventional till, and I guess the beauty of downforce, whether we're talking about hydraulic downforce, pneumatic downforce, and closing wheel adjustments, is with all the monitoring capabilities we have now, I think it's become a real eye opener for us on, we would just set it and leave it in the past, and now it's moving and adjusting. And if there's times we don't need as much because of the soil being just in a different condition or a different time of day, we don't use as much. And that's great because we're not creating any excess compaction, any excess wear and tear, on componentry, gauge wheel arm bearings, things like that, gauge wheel arms. So closing wheel downforce, it kind of walks you through observing what you see. Is it closing the seed trench? If you say yes, great. If you say no, once, it dials us back into adjusting that from your monitor with those pneumatic closing wheels. Downforce adjustment. Verify. So once again, throughout the app, they'll talk about making sure you're at about 100 pounds for your default margin, and then go do your field check and start from there. And then that's here under the validation portion. And same rules apply. I mean, we've been talking about when you leave the planter down, right? And you get out, and if you do the old gauge wheel kind of kick or see if, make sure it doesn't spin, right? If it spins over easy by hand, you're going to need a little bit more downforce here. But if you're looking at your seed trench and it's leaving, it's scuffing and it's just compacting the sidewalls considerably. I always, you got your pocket knife or you have your seed digger in your hand typically, and you're looking at, you might be looking at seed depth, and you should be observing that sidewall. And I always try to pop my pocket knife into that sidewall and see how much force it takes for me to peel away a part of it. And if it takes a lot, there's chances, and you got plenty of moisture, chances it might be a little too much. So singulation help in this app. So we talked about troubleshooting, if we have singulation problems, that really, it starts driving us back to the meter. Okay. And taking a look at, also, some simple things too. Are we using enough talc? Those big CCS tanks, those 50 bushel tanks, take 16 cups of talc per 50 bushel. The math is the same as when we put 1 cup in a 3 bushel box. So, of course, this is a talc graphite 80-20 mix, which is now what we recommend with the Promax 4, not the Promax 40s, but the seed bowls and the double eliminator types and things that we're using in our Exacta merge planters. Making sure that everything is clean and there's no debris building up inside your brush belts. I've heard of things happening here. If you're running fertilizer, we want all that application if you're doing it in furrow, behind this brush belt, so we're not gumming up and getting those sort of things happening in here. Also, double eliminator adjustments. This is the view of that double eliminator. Typically, that third position works for us, but if for some reason it didn't get latched, it fell down, all that could happen. Or the condition of the tips of those are like, they call those a polytine double eliminator. So maybe they're wore. Might be time for that to be replaced. Make sure your knockout wheel's in position and it's lining straight up with this is a really zoomed in view of the holes in the seed bowl. Is that actively knocking that seed out? So these are things we can look at proactively, right? So we're not experiencing that downtime or adjustment time. But typically what happens when we have singulation problems is we just didn't get something slapped back together or latched back together quite right. Hub height was the last thing they talked about, and hub tension, seals, making sure we don't got something pinched there. So the app does a nice job walking us through those things to, as we think about what's responsible, those agronomic factors we started with, right? Population, emergence, having the productivity piece of things, it really does walk us through those adjustments to help us get there. So, Chris, is there something I'm missing here in the app that you've explored or you found useful? Or
you did a great job. I apologize. I was on mute during the last transition there, so I was going to make one comment that a lot of these things that you've covered here, don't wait till your corn insurance day to try to do all this. I encourage folks that even if it's April 1st and the soil conditions are fit, to even just go out and make a few passes just to get some of the gremlins out. Everything that you covered today would be good to do even 1 to 2 weeks before you actually intend to plant, even if soil conditions aren't, the soil temperatures aren't accurate. That'll give you enough time that if you do need to order parts or get us to come out and do some service, that we'll have time to do that. Cool.
Cool. You know what? When you talked about 2 weeks early and finding a dry spot, and I really didn't talk much about um, section control adjustments, and we touched a little bit on it in a couple weeks, but I think it would pay to just pop back into my simulator. Are you seeing that now on your screen?
Yep.
All right, and then we're gonna pop back into that and hit my menu, applications, and go to section control, and just kind of remind you know if you're going to go scratch some dirt and go plant and test everything, great time to get your off or your shut-offs tuned in, for lack of better words there. And we do that under the section control screen on these Gen 4s by navigating to this performance tuning section. So I guess back we talked about overlap settings. Make sure you get that set for what you're desiring to do. Do you want to plant the whole section through to the row, or do you want some intentional skip or overlap? You can set that up over here. And then once again, under performance tuning, make sure we understand what's a skip and what's an overlap, and dial into here. And this is where we make those adjustments. So I always take like a ratchet strap, and I take the tension off my closing wheels and strap that up, so I have a row that I can just jump out quick and visualize real quick instead of digging. And entering planted area. So this is going into your headland. So this was what we used to call a turn off time. So entering a planted area. So you're going into your headland, it's already planted. Okay, what do we see? Do we see a skip? Do we see an overlap? Okay, how big is it? And then also note, before you jump out of the cab, pick your speed that you're going to come in and out of the headlands with. If it's going to be a flat 5 miles an hour, or if it's going to be 3, you decide. But note that, stay consistent. Get your transmission set up such that that you can do that. IVTs are really easy that way. If you've got some sort of power shift, instead of throttling back and being inconsistent, use gear shifts if you can. We've got awesome features in our tractors too, with iTech integrated control of. Is that what we still call it, Chris? We don't call it iTech anymore.
Yeah, it's
tractor.
Acronym soup here. Intelligent Total Equipment Control.
Yeah, intelligent. Yeah, total equipment control. But I mean, you can create a lot of consistency. Is my point. In that in and out with those controls, depending on what model tractor you got in front of you. And then, of course, exiting planted area, that is your on time. Okay, you're coming out of your headlands. We're firing everything back on. So is that if it happens too soon, you've got an overlap. If it's too late, it's a skip. But and then how big is that? And then it decides for us. It will then put a timed offset in under the equipment profile for us. So, and I think we've talked about this multiple times now, but if these are just way off, I mean, we're talking about electric drive systems. They are very quick to respond. If they're way off and these numbers are big, we've got a measurement problem. We need to get back to basics and double check that. Well, I think I've exhausted the things that I had on my list to talk about. Is there any other questions?
No, I think we got them covered here. So appreciate the time, Margot. Just a few quick reminders here at the end of the clinic here. Again, this will be available on Facebook and on YouTube, and you can go back and look at our other clinics that we did around Operations Center and other planter clinics. And we intend to continue to do these throughout the year. Operations Center is updated twice every 2 months, and so we'll try to do quick updates on those, and we're entertaining some other topics as well. So if you have any requests, please put them in the comments. So just a few quick reminders on our website, kibbleeq.com. We have a new tool called Kibble Access. Kibble Access, it's in our banner here. You can go ahead and click. And Kibble Access is a portal that you can create an account and get access to ordering parts online, seeing parts availability from your local location. And then probably the best function of it is you can have access to your parts and service invoices on your own. So you, especially at tax time here, I know we got a little extension, but you can go out here and print off all of your own invoices. And for the month of March, if you sign up for Kibble Access, you are going to be entered to win a John Deere gun safe. And if you can create your own account here, or you can do this side by side with the parts guys at any of our locations. And then also continue to check out specials. We have these continually changing. This specials area talks about our different service and parts specials that helps you save some money while making sure your equipment's maintained. But as a reminder, two big things. A lot of the things we talked about in the previous sessions about wireless data transfer and monitoring your equipment remotely, you can do that with the 4G MTG, and we have a promotion to upgrade your 2 or 3G MTG to the new device. And then lastly, 3,000 and 6,000 receivers have a required software update in order to run this spring. So we're getting to go time here. So if you have not gotten your software updated on your 3,000 or 6,000 receiver, please do so. You can either do that on stellarsupport.com or have us do it for a small fee. Appreciate everybody's time. Thank you again. Thanks for your business, and be safe.
Thank you.